Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're talking about WB's recent move to patent the Nemesis system and what is truly sort of an unprecedented action in the video game industry. I'll get into that in just a second. But before we get into the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell if you haven't already. All right, let's get right into it. So WB Games' Nemesis system patent was approved this week after multiple attempts. The patent goes into effect later this month. So WB has been trying to do this for years, and you might be wondering, okay, what is the Nemesis system? Well, let's actually fast forward and explain exactly what it is. So the Nemesis system, the Nemesis characters, Nemesis forts, social vendettas, and followers in computer games codifies the functions of Monolith's Nemesis system. So the Nemesis system was included in Shadow of War. And basically, I will read you here what it is. As IGN mentions, it's fairly obtuse and kind of difficult to understand, but here's sort of the simplified version. While the language in the application is fairly obtuse, as most patent claims tend to be, the short version is that the patent covers a system featuring procedurally generated NPCs that exist in a hierarchy and interact with and will remember the actions of players with prior encounters, more specifically, have their appearance behavior altered by players and their prior experiences, and whose places in that hierarchy can change and affect the position of other NPCs in said hierarchy. So you'll notice here that it's fairly specific in what they're actually patenting, but this is really bad for a number of reasons. And we're going to read some reactions from people on the internet and explain why this is so terrible. And it should be fairly obvious, but if it's not, I'll get into some examples of like, okay, what if Halo copyrighted patented multiplayer back in 2003? What if they're like, okay, we're the first game to ever do online multiplayer shooter game, so we're going to patent that. Or maybe it was Doom or whoever it was back in 2002. Or what if Call of Duty said, oh, we're going to patent kill streaks. You can't do that anymore. You can't go on kill streaks because we own that. We created that. And what really happens in the video game industry is that the good ideas rise to the top and everybody borrows from each other. But I don't think it's in a bad way because these video game companies, unless they're creating two games that are identical, are not really competing with one another. For instance, Madden 2021 is not really competing with Call of Duty. It is insofar as most people have limited gaming budgets. They're only going to buy so many games in a year. So in that sort of surface level sense, maybe there is some level of competition. But the reality of it is these games benefit by the gaming industry performing well. If other games perform well and entice gamers, then people are going to be more likely to buy consoles. And if more people are buying consoles, more people will buy other games, even if it doesn't directly relate to that publisher. So in other words, what I'm saying is every publisher has an incentive for the video game industry to perform well. And this is counterintuitive to that, and I'll explain why. So reading now from IGN, WB Interactive Entertainment publishes of Shadow of Mordor, Middle-earth, which, by the way, was a pretty mediocre, performing game. It didn't do well in terms of sales or anything, so just something to note there. So they patented the Nemesis system, which they did create, to be fair, but there's a caveat to that, and I'll get into that in just a second. The U.S. Patent Office issued notice on February 3rd, 2021, that the patent would go into effect on February 23rd. Warner Brothers can maintain the patent until 2035. Okay, so nobody's using the Nemesis system unless they pay WB a bunch of money to use it. The patent filed is Nemesis characters, Nemesis forts, social vendettas, and followers in computer games. So even this idea of social vendettas, I'm wondering, does Telltale fall under that? Because the actions that we take as a player can affect how other characters in Telltale games relate to us. That to me seems like a social vendetta system. Walking Dead, Telltale game, whatever. That's kind of like a social vendetta where characters can remember your prior interactions. So there's a lot of gray area in this. And like I said, the Nemesis system as it is, and Shadow of Mordor, just broadly speaking, borrowed a lot from prior games, particularly Assassin's Creed and other things like that. But WB was just the one to patent it. And now we're going to see this trickle-down effect, this snowball effect, where everybody's going to be patenting everything. I guarantee it. So someone's going to create some system or some gameplay mechanic, and the first thing that they're going to do is put a label on what it is. So it can't just be, oh, kill streaks. That's what they did back in 2009 with Call of Duty. No. It's going to be like, the kill streak system or the gameplay reward mechanism or some bullshit. They're going to make it up like the Nemesis system. What does that mean? So the first thing they're going to do is create some name for it. And then they're going to be like, this is an exclusive system that we created. And we're going to bring it to some patent lawyers and some patent judge that doesn't even know anything about video games and convince them that we're the first ones to ever do this shit, which is not true. Hardly anything about the Nemesis system is really exclusive to Warner Brothers. as I mentioned, Telltale Games has this whole vendetta system and things like that, where players respond to your interactions, and your interactions shape future interactions, which is a big part of the Nemesis system, where if I face an enemy and let's say I humiliate them, the next time we face off against them, they'll go down in that hierarchy and they will remember us. Telltale did that in 2012. I mean, so anyway, okay, with the language and the application is obtuse, patent claims tend to be, the short version is that the patent covers a system featuring procedurally generated NPCs and the hierarchy of that. So I already read that part, but they kind of match this and graph it out where the NPC is here, NPC event, and it affects, external changes. But as I mentioned, Telltale did this back in 2012 for the most part, with some differences. Have you played Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor? Okay. I thought there was going to be some poll of exactly how many people played it. Okay, anyways. It also covers the social conquest battles from Shadow of Mordor, wherein players can fortify or attack one another's strongholds to show how their army of orcs fares off against friends. Again, that's super vague. That is super vague, because other games, I'm even thinking of RTSs and video games like that, like Company of Heroes, have utilized something similar to this. Warner Brothers has been trying to secure the patent for the system since 2015, but they've been repeatedly rejected. Internal rejections claim that there were too many similarities in the application of their patents. No shit. Including ones from Square Enix, Konar, and Webkins. Okay, that's bizarre. So I guess they had to specify the patent a little bit. And broadly speaking, getting off of this article now, because I don't think that anything they really say here is, that important. I wanted to go to the reaction that people had to this, because people are acutely and accurately noting that this is not good for the video game industry. And why is this the case? Well, like I said, Halo could have patented a whole bunch of things. Like, think about the first-person shooter game, okay? I don't know what that is. Maybe Counter-Strike Go would maybe be the first one. Or not CSGO, but just Counter-Strike in general, from the late 1990s or whatever. Imagine if they had patented the system wherein you play shooter games and it is from the eye perspective of the player that you are playing as, which is a first-person shooter game. Imagine if that had been patented. We would never see another first-person shooter game ever again. It wouldn't exist unless people paid a bunch of money to Counter-Strike to get that mechanic, which no company would do. They would just create their own mechanic. So without that, literally Call of Duty, Rainbow Six Siege, all your favorite shooter Halo would never exist if Counter-Strike back in the late 90s had patented first-person shooters. Of course, there was the first one. Someone had to do it first. And they could have patented that. And this sets a very bad precedent. And I'm kind of surprised that more game companies haven't done this. We saw that Webkins has filed these patents before. But broadly speaking, there's almost like this pact within the video game industry, just like in other creative industries, wherein, we're going to borrow ideas from one another. Look at in the novel scene, with fiction novels. There will be trends where it's like, or television shows where, The Walking Dead comes along, that's super successful, and then a bunch of other zombie shows and zombie movies pop up that, are not necessarily directly related, but they certainly borrow concepts from it. And of course, there was zombie stuff way before The Walking Dead. But then, once again, I ask a similar question, like, could zombie movies, broadly speaking, be patented? Of course, I'm not a patent lawyer. I can't really speak to that. It seems a little bit too broad. Patents are generally reserved for, like, systems, again, like this whole Nemesis system. It's like, an algorithm that they create where the characters sort of correspond and act based upon that algorithm or system that they've constructed. So it's not really creative ideas per se, like this type of movie or this type of game can be patented, but specific mechanics within that game or movie can be patented. And now we're going to see RPGs like Assassin's Creed and Fallout and Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty say, oh, we're going to patent this. We created this. This is ours. Nobody else can use it. If you want to use it, if you want to have kill streaks in your game, you better pay us, whatever, $100 million. If you want to use first-person shooter mechanics, again, it's too late for that. But again, I'm just looking at this precedent that it sets, and this is going to seriously stifle creative input in the future with video games, because we want the best ideas and the best mechanics to rise up. We want features to be borrowed among studios. If Rocksteady did something phenomenal with Batman Arkham, some gameplay system or whatever, let's say free flow combat, Rocksteady could have patented that theoretically. They even called it free flow combat. So they're going to say, oh, we created this free flow combat system. Insomniac, you can't use it. It's ours. Where do you go from here? So, okay. Anyways, here's the first reaction from Mike Bithell, who is in the video game industry. This is really gross, especially for a franchise that built its brilliant Nemesis system on top of a whole heap of mechanics replicated from other games. That's exactly correct. Assassin's Creed, of course, was heavily borrowed from by this game. So that's really frightening to see that they're basically filing patents with gameplay mechanics and systems that they've already borrowed from other people, but they were just the first one to put a patent on it, so therefore it's theirs. So Assassin's Creed just got screwed really hard. Jason Shamblin, and as I said, these patent lawyers, I'm sure that they litigated very thoroughly and looked at the case for years, but the reality of it is, these people just aren't gamers, so what the hell do they know? They can't really say, oh, well, these features are in other games. It's not very easy for them to see that. Jason says, WB knew that the Nemesis system was the only outstanding feature of their otherwise painfully bland open world game, so they took steps to covet and jealousy guard it from other people who may try to emulate it. Sounds terribly familiar. As I recall, it didn't end well for him either. Volundar says, used to be people took game mechanic ideas and ran with them. Ripoffs of Doom or Dune 2 became successes and further recategorized the former as foundational works in the FPS and RTS genres. That's a great point too, is that the Nemesis system could actually become iconic and highly utilized by other studios, and then that would obviously look great for Monolith and WB. But WB is saying, no, that's not good enough. We don't want to become the next Doom. We don't want to become the next Halo or Counter-Strike. We want to basically restrict every other studio from emulating us. We want to be the only ones that can utilize this. And by the way, this is a power play because now they're going to use this Nemesis system in their other WB games, particularly Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad, and probably the Harry Potter game too, if I had to guess. Ice Cool Archon, I am simply at a loss for words with how stupid some gamers, trademarked, can be to begin clapping at this news. This is similar to why we don't have mini games during loading screens. So yes, that was something that was patented, I think, 5 years ago or maybe more. I can't remember who did it. Maybe like Konami or something. I can't exactly remember, but I do recall mini games during loading screens was something that was implemented in one game. It was patented and nobody wanted to pay to license that feature out because it's like, okay, it's not really necessary to create a good game, but otherwise every game could have mini games during loading screens and that would be awesome. But instead we just get nothing and have to look at a boring loading screen. Grand Theft Auto particularly needs it because their loading screens take forever. Kevin Stewart says, I bet WB is super relieved no one previously patented skill trees, XP, multi-button melee combat, procedural generation, inventory screens, mission structure, video game motion capture, map and HUD exploration iconography, possessive merit systems, 1 out of 325. And Keith is exactly right. This is the main takeaway from this, is that this creates a dangerous precedent where fundamental gameplay mechanics like the Nemesis system that, I don't know if you're familiar again with the Nemesis system, it's slightly convoluted. I tried to explain it the best that I could, but you kind of need to play the game to understand how it works. But there's nothing really brilliant about it. It kind of just takes side missions and it takes it up a level where if you beat someone, there might be like a scar that they remember from your previous encounter, or they will remember you, or they'll make notice when you see them again of like, oh, you beat me last time, but I'm going to beat you this time. Like, nothing about this is brilliant. There's a reason this game didn't sell very well, okay? Like, there was nothing about the system that we were like, oh my god, this is so great. But of course, there's some aspects of it that were pretty interesting with the fact that you can build relationships with enemies and NPCs. That's pretty interesting, and building that history with NPCs. And it adds more life to side missions and NPCs. So, besides that, it doesn't really do very much, but now nobody else can utilize it unless you work for Warner Brothers. The other thing about this is that the studio that actually created it doesn't really get shit. It's more just Warner Brothers, So I feel kind of bad for Monolith in that sense, if I'm being perfectly honest. But that's pretty much the update. This Nemesis system thing, it really sucks. It's not good for the industry. It's unfortunate. I'm curious to know in the comments below what you guys think, because maybe some of you disagree with me and think that, well, they certainly own the rights to it. I am not here to speak on any position of what they legally have the rights to do. The patent system in and of itself is inherently can be a problem. Okay, so I'm not saying that anything they did was illegal or even necessarily shouldn't have happened or shouldn't have been allowed to happen. I'm only making the argument that in an ideal world, it doesn't happen. In an ideal world, these companies, Monolith and WB Games and Rocksteady and Rockstar and Treyarch or Infinity Ward, whatever, they're all borrowing ideas from one another, and the best ideas rise to the top. And if I'm a game dev and I create the Nemesis system that other studios use, I don't know that I'd be that upset about it. And if they do with this patent, it's not like you're getting any money for it. Warner Brothers is, so it's not like you necessarily are even rewarded for that creation or that patent that is now being scooped up by your corporate overlord to control that. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. This is sucky. But on the bright side, we could see the Nemesis system in future WB games. And if it's built up further, because in the first game it wasn't very good, if they build it up more, then it could be pretty interesting. I just wish that we could see it in other games.